Opening. Broken skulls with lethal puncture wounds, bound skeletons with arrowheads, lodged in their spines, mass graves filled with hundreds of scalped victims. The archaeological record tells a grim story of our past. For millions of years, death has stalked humanity, sometimes through the jaws of predators, but often at the hands of our fellow humans. Our when predators become prey. Story begins not with humans as killers, but as the killed. For millions of years, before we claimed our place at top the food chain, our ancestors lived in the shadow of fangs and claws. One of the oldest and most striking examples comes from South Africa, where researchers discovered the skull cap of a juvenile Paranthropus, robust, catalogued as specimen SK54. This fossil, approximately 1.5 million years old, tells a chilling story of predation. According to the Australian Museum, this skull contains two small round holes that perfectly match the lower canine teeth of an ancient leopard. The evidence suggests that a leopard caught this young hominin and dragged its prey up into a tree to consume it, just as modern leopards do today. Dr. C.K. Brain, a South African paleoanthropologist, demonstrated in the 1970s that the two puncture marks on the skull precisely fit the spacing of a leopard's lower canines. The Tong child. Another famous fossil discovered in South Africa shows evidence of a different deadly predator. This 3-year-old Australopithecus africanus, who lived about 2-3 million years ago, appears to have fallen victim to an eagle or other bird of prey. Researchers studying the Tong child skull identified puncture marks and depression fractures, similar to those found on the skulls of modern primates killed by eagles. This discovery suggests that our early ancestors were vulnerable to predation from the air as well as the ground. Such deadly encounters with predators drove the development of social bonds, sophisticated tools, and heightened awareness, survival adaptations that would later define our species as the Nataruk massacre. Ancestors evolved, the greatest threat to human survival shifted. No longer were large predators our primary concern. By 10,000 years ago, the most dangerous animal a human could encounter was, paradoxically, another human. Around the shores of what was once Lake Turana in Kenya, archaeologists made a discovery that changed our understanding of prehistoric violence at a place called Nataruk. Researchers from Cambridge University unearthed the remains of 27 individuals, including men, women, and at least 6 children. What made this find remarkable was the clear evidence of violent death. Dr. Marta Mirazon-Lar, who led the study published in Nature in 2016, described the injuries as shocking. In their mercilessness, of the 12 relatively complete skeletons, 10 showed unmistakable signs of a violent end. The evidence includes skulls crushed by blunt force, broken limbs, and projectile points embedded in the victim's bones. One man was found with an obsidian blade still lodged in his skull. 4 individuals, including a woman in the late stages of pregnancy, appear to have had their hands bound before death. The victims at Nataruk died from extreme trauma, to their heads and faces broken, hands and knees and arrow wounds to the neck and chest. The attacks appear to have been systematic and thorough, with no apparent attempt to bury the dead. Afterward, the significance of Nataruk lies in how it challenges traditional views that organized warfare emerged only after agriculture. These hunter-gatherers had no cities, no farmland, and no obvious wealth to defend. Yet they engaged in coordinated violence against another group. Professor Robert Foley, a co-author of the Nataruk study, suggests that this violence may reflect something fundamental about human nature. He notes that the capacity for lethal aggression likely evolved alongside our capacity for cooperation and altruism. The attackers at Nataruk used weapons that would not normally be carried while hunting or fishing. The attack combined distance weapons like arrows with close-range weapons like clubs and stone knives, suggesting planning and coordination. Why would one group of hunter-gatherers attack another with such brutality? The researchers proposed two possibilities. First, that the Knot location, with its abundant freshwater and food resources, might have been coveted territory worth fighting for. Second, that such violence might simply have been a common response when different groups encountered each other. The Jebel Sahaba Cemetery. While Naruk represents a single moment of extreme violence, other sites reveal that such brutality was not isolated. Even earlier in what is now Sudan, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of something perhaps more disturbing. Violence as a persistent way of life, discovered in the 1960s during archaeological salvage work ahead of the construction of the A1 High Dam. The 400-year-old cemetery at Jebel Sahaba provides one of the earliest records of widespread deadly conflict. The cemetery contained the remains of 61 men, women, and children. When archaeologist Fred Wendorf first excavated the site, he noticed clear signs of violence, including broken bones, fractured skulls, and stone projectiles, either embedded in the victims' bones or lying near their bodies. Initially, Wendorf interpreted the site as evidence of a single devastating battle or massacre. However, recent reanalysis by Isabelle Crevecoeur and her team suggests a different, perhaps even more disturbing scenario. Their detailed study, published in Scientific Reports in 2021, revealed over 100 previously undocumented healed and unhealed lesions on the bones. About 25 of the skeletons exhibited both healed and fresh trauma, indicating these individuals had survived violent encounters only to be killed in subsequent attacks. Rather than a single catastrophic event, the evidence now suggests these people experienced persistent, recurrent violence over time. The pattern reveals a community under constant threat of raids and ambushes, with death coming not all at once but through a grinding series of attacks. Christopher Newsel, a physical anthropologist at the University of Bordeaux, notes that these findings challenge earlier views that warfare was a modern invention. The people of Jebel Sahaba lived during a period of major climate change at the end of the last ice age, which may have increased competition for scarce resources. The Crow Creek massacre pattern of organized violence continued long after Jebel Sahaba, moving forward thousands of years and across an ocean. We find evidence that resource competition and territorial disputes remained lethal well into more recent prehistory. In what is now South Dakota, the Crow Creek site presents one of the most extensive prehistoric massacres ever documented in North America, dating to about 1325 CE. The Crow Creek site, located along the Missouri River, was home to a large village of the initial coalescent culture ancestors of the Arikara people. The settlement was surrounded by a fortification ditch, suggesting they already lived with the threat of attack. In 1978, archaeologists discovered human remains eroding from the fortification ditch. After receiving permission from the tribal council to excavate, they uncovered the skeletal remains of at least 486 individuals who had been killed in a single attack. The evidence of violence was unmistakable. Many skulls showed signs of scalping. There were numerous cases of dismemberment, with hands and feet cut off and skulls separated from bodies. According to the archaeological evidence, men, women, and children were all victims of the attack. As human societies grew, ritualized executions more complex, so too did our methods of killing. From chaotic group violence, a more calculated form of deadly ritual emerged, one that tells us even more about how our ancestors viewed life. Death and justice. the Halbert site in Germany dating to approximately 7 Saron years ago during the early Neolithic period reveals a disturbing picture of organized killing. Archaeologists uncovered a mass grave containing 9 individuals, 8 young adult males and 1 young adult woman. According to archaeologist Christian Meyer, who published his findings in Nature Communications in 2018, what makes this site extraordinary is the pattern of injuries. Unlike other Neolithic massacre sites, where wounds appear randomly scattered, the Halbert victims show trauma almost exclusively to the back of the head. These weren't frenzied killings. In the heat of battle or chaotic raids, archaeological evidence suggests the victims were subdued, possibly kneeling or bound, and then methodically executed. One by one. After death, their bodies were unceremoniously dumped together in a burial pit, with limbs tangled in a manner completely unlike the careful arrangements typical of Neolithic graves. Isotope analysis revealed a crucial detail. These people were outsiders brought to Halberst as captives, rather than killed during local conflict. This suggests an organized system of prisoner-taking and ritual killing that cross geographic boundaries. The Halberstadt executions represent the earliest clear evidence of systematic execution in human history, showing that by 7,000 years ago, humans had already developed the social organization required for controlled group violence, a significant milestone in the evolution of human conflict. While massacres and executions, individual tragedies, capture our attention with their scale and horror, prehistoric death often came in more intimate personal forms. Individual stories of survival, suffering, and eventual death remind us that each skeleton represents not just evidence, but a life lived at Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq. Archaeologists discovered the remains of a Neanderthal man who had survived multiple serious injuries before his death approximately 45,000 years ago, known as Shanidar. 1. This individual had a crushing injury to his skull that likely caused blindness. In one eye, his right arm was withered and had been amputated above the elbow. He also suffered from arthritis and other injuries. Despite these devastating injuries, skeletal analysis shows that he survived for many years afterward, suggesting his community cared for him. Despite his disabilities, his eventual death and careful burial indicate both the harshness of prehistoric life and the compassion that existed even in those difficult times. In another remarkable case, researchers studying a 400,000-year-old Homo heidelbergensis skull from Kabwe, Zambia, found evidence that this individual likely died from severe tooth decay and gum disease. The skull shows multiple large cavities and abscesses that affected the jawbone. This level of dental disease was unusual for prehistoric humans, whose diets typically contained less sugar than modern diets. Around 7 million years ago in East Africa, a woman known by her specimen, number KNN-ER1908, died from what appears to be vitamin A poisoning. Her skeleton shows abnormal bone growth, covering her arms and legs similar to conditions seen in modern humans who consume toxic levels of vitamin A. Researchers speculate she might have eaten the liver of a predator, which can contain dangerous concentrations of this vitamin. These collusion individual cases remind us that while violence was certainly part of prehistoric life, disease accidents and other misfortunes also claimed many lives. The archaeological record preserves these personal tragedies, alongside the larger scale events, giving us glimpses into individual human experiences across vast stretches of time. By studying the most brutal deaths from our distant past, we gain insight, not just into how people died, but how they lived, what they valued, and the challenges they faced in their struggles, victories, and tragedies. We can recognize something of ourselves connecting us across the vast expanse of time to the shared experience of being human. Even in our darkest chapters, these ancient stories remind us that we are part of a single human journey that stretches back millions of years into the prehistory of our species.